Hi guys, I made this video about how I view FE in response to Binyamin's interview that I had recently. Hopefully it gives a little bit more insight than I was able to provide in that interview into how I see FE and maybe even TI a little bit play out for me. Alright, so we talk about saviors in terms of like being responsible, but something that's really kind of helping me parse my type is thinking about prioritization instead. So it's not just like, do I feel responsible for the emotions in the room? It's like, what, I don't know what that means exactly, but prioritizing those over what like a detached solution would be. Actually getting to the TI, that's where I see the struggle for me as a savior FE. And that's where I was sort of seeing things as a demon, where I'm thinking like, to get to the solution, I have to understand where all these people are at, and that feels like a burden, right? Because yeah, I really need to pull in all this information to be able to get to that solution, and so the decision then becomes hard, which I guess that's part of the decider part, where I'm having trouble doing the double deciding and really allowing those two parts to meet. So yeah, I'm just really pulling in a lot of what's going on with the tribe, trying to make sure that like I'm incorporating everybody, and I guess that kind of can outweigh my own perspective and make it difficult for me to sort of synthesize with the TI and come to a firm conclusion, because it always just seems like there's more information out there, and I feel like I'm kind of incorporating both my saviors here into this, where I'm pulling in lots of information and I'm just like having trouble narrowing down and really figuring it out, because I'm so obligated to keep pulling that information in from outside me. So yeah, it's that double extrovertedness of accumulating, maybe coming to a conclusion, but then immediately going back to that accumulation, because there's always just more and more and more to pull in, and making sure that it's really like making sense to everyone, like everyone can really get something out of this. I definitely see myself going deep on TI, like when I'm writing an article, right? I'm not necessarily like going out and being like sending it to a bunch of people, being like, do you like this? If not, I'll update it. Sometimes I do kind of feel that way when I put it out there, but I don't usually. I go back and do it just because that's probably too boring to do. But shoot, I looked at the camera and now I feel like I wasn't looking at the camera. Anyway, what was I saying? With an article, I am sort of pinging off indirectly, where I'm thinking like how somebody else might interpret this, how me as someone not super entrenched in this is going to interpret it, and thus like trying to play the role of a dum-dum so to speak, who is just like coming into this and really confused and just like wants to get it in its like clearest, most understood form. And that's what I'm like really trying to do, and that's where I see myself. I don't know if I'm watering things down necessarily, maybe I am a little bit, but trying to make it appealing to different people that are coming in. So I'm thinking about how those people might interpret it, and I'm just guessing, right? It's not about actually asking everyone, because it's just impossible. Like I just can't do that. But I'm certainly pulling that information in all the time, so that I'm constantly better at that process when it gets to that point where I am by myself I am trying to do that synthesizing work, whether that be in sleep or whatever state I am in, what animals I'm using when I'm writing. Like it sounds like I'm using a little bit of play even there, where I'm really just like considering these different points of view and how they might look at this information. So yeah, that's where I see myself pinging off. Generally it's more indirect in terms of like when I want to come to a decision that I'm responsible for. Like I know that I'm responsible for decisions just in a role, right? Like I'm responsible to write this article. Maybe I made myself responsible for it because it's my website, but even in that case, I'm thinking I want to provide something that I would like to read coming into this. So I'm like thinking about a person like me coming into the system and wanting there to be an accessible resource to go to that has these things organized so that I can go through it. It's almost like as myself, I want it to be organized because I don't want to have to organize it, but I'm organizing it now, which is confusing. But I'm doing the demons for the future me so that the future me doesn't have to deal with those demons. It's fucking weird. I haven't thought about that before. What else? Right. So when they talk about a ping, like what do they really mean by that? Like there is the ping that is directly hitting the tribe with a question and going like, how do you feel about this? And like in certain situations that's appropriate, right? But not always. Like say you're in a work meeting and you're trying to get people on the same page about something. You can't just ask people how they're feeling about something. They're not going to give you a straight answer, right? That just isn't how that works. Unless someone is particularly bold, which I do have a coworker I work with that it is willing to be divisive in that way. So maybe he's lead TI or something, able to sort of suppress that. But it generally just most people are just kind of like nodding along, like whatever. Let's just move on. Yes, tell us what to do. Like that's just easy to do in a workplace setting, right? And I do see myself sort of wanting to align with management in those scenarios where I do want to sort of help lift the emotional atmosphere, for lack of better words, towards something that is more productive, helping us move in the direction. And whether that's just to align with them or whether it's because I think that's going to be better for myself and my immediate team in the long run, that's a little less clear to me. Like, of course I want things better for myself. Like, I think inherently humans are pretty selfish, right? Like even DE stuff, it's like I'm doing stuff for you so that you'll do stuff for me is an inherently selfish act. So the DIs are just more upfront about it, I guess. I don't know, like whatever. But yeah, in those meetings, like I know that there is this need for the team to really start to let the ball roll, right? Or we'll just stay stagnant. So there's this desire from my selfish perspective to keep things moving forward. I want things to be shaken up a little bit. I know there's opportunities for growth. Like I'm into this self-development type personality stuff, right? I don't know how much I truly use it for self-development, but that's me. So it's actually interesting with the work meetings recently. I've been online with work meetings, and now everyone is for COVID days. So it can be a little trickier to read the room in those situations, and that has been hard for me. when I'm conveying a message and not sure how people are taking it. So like I'll be the only one. This is in the past before COVID. I'll have been the only one on the phone calling into a room full of people who are all in the same room, and I'll kind of give my perspective and not be able to see like how they're responding to it, and that made me pretty uncomfortable, and it was pretty challenging for me to do that sometimes. Like if I'm suggesting a change that we could make and I'm not able to see whether people are hesitant about that, and potentially like shape my message to better convey it to them and really see which parts they're particularly hesitant about, that makes it really challenging for me, because I don't know, I just don't think about it in terms of like I need to make this solution better, which I guess would be like the TI way of doing it. I don't really know. It's me bullshitting a little bit there, but it is just like I this is before I'm really like crafting out the solution. I'm just like kind of brainstorming. I was going to say like shitting out ideas, which they kind of have claimed that as a TE thing, but it is sort of like, what do you think about going in this direction? What do you think about going in this direction? And these might be things that already exist, so therefore I'm just like throwing out SE stuff maybe, and that's where it's like looks like TE. I don't know. So like the fact that TE is like shitting out ideas, but I'm just kind of like trying to get a feel for what people think about going in different directions, so that I can then go and figure out how to make it work, right? Like once I know what people are valuing, I guess, then I can go and figure out what will work. And that's where you can start to see an overlap between FE and TE. And I mean, they do talk about how FE and TE look super similar. So that's one of the areas where I do think that sounds somewhat similar. It's like, is this something that makes more sense to you? Like, is this a good direction? And I was doing this earlier with someone where I was sort of trying to see how they felt about a function for themselves. So like, this is someone that's untyped. I was sort of shitting out ideas, right? Sort of saying like, this might be like a thing. If it's sort of resonating with you, then we can look more into it, right? And maybe we'll figure out it's bullshit, because once we logic it out the whole way, we might figure out that it's bullshit. But starting from this point of like, does this seem like anything? That we're kind of figuring out where we want to start digging, right? And so that is kind of the inverse there of the TI person that they talk about, who's going off and working on this book that's super in depth about watches or something. And then they come out and go like, hey, do you guys value this? And they're like, no, I just like buy my watch on Amazon. I don't really care about repairing watches. Like if mine breaks, I'll probably just buy a new one. So I don't really care about your watch fixing book. And then the TI person's all offended because they spent so much time working on it. And that's like the thing I think about now in my head, with like an extremely DI person going and working on something alone and then coming out and being upset that the tribe doesn't value it. One of their videos or something, but so I do sort of see myself, and that's kind of where I thought I saw myself doing NE in a way, but I guess it's just feminine play, kind of going like, is this a thing that we should value? Look at this over here, look at this over here. Like I'm just sort of looking at all these different things and trying to figure out where to dig. And that's kind of where I was just seeing like, any exploring concepts, but I'm looking at real things, I guess. Real, like, concrete systems that someone else has developed. Like, I'm looking at getting things done. I'm looking at apps. Like, is this something that I could value or would have value to me, and help me to sort of sort out my OI issues. So yeah, I guess that's where I see myself more pinging off the tribe. Just kind of like the brainstorming stuff, and that's where I kind of saw myself as an NE again, in my, yeah, that's right, proclivity to want to brainstorm with people, and throwing ideas around. So that's just like where descriptions of types with NE really resonated with me in terms of wanting to explore ideas. I mean, NE is called ideas in socionics, so that's just like what I see that function as, or what I did see that function as. Whereas in OP, it's defined such that both NE and SE can sort of explore ideas in that way, but these are real things we could be doing versus gathering concepts. So maybe one way to think about the difference between NE and SE, therefore, is in that, are you suggesting something we can go do, or are you suggesting a category of things we could look at? And how exactly that looks different, I'm not sure I have an example offhand, but I guess that might be something I look at more closely in the future. Okay, and so in terms of dealing with the darkness and the feelings and the emotions, to me, I kind of think about that in terms of, that's another data point, I guess. So I'm gathering in these data points, and that's how this person feels about that. But how do other people feel about that? Because like one person spiking doesn't necessarily mean like we need to necessarily change the whole thing. It certainly implies that other people could feel that same way, but it isn't something that I pay super close attention to. So if one person is like shitting on something, and I certainly like weigh up different people's perspectives more, like if I'm more familiar with a person and know sort of what weight I should give to their perspective, then that matters more. Like someone close to me, like my fiance, if she's like upset about something, that weighs more heavily on me. And I want to help her with that, right? But dealing with the darkness and the feelings and emotions, like when someone is upset, I mean, it's difficult. I want to sort of take that information and go and figure out a solution, but that's not always easy to do, especially when there just isn't a solution, I guess. It's not always a straightforward solution to problems like that. Yeah, and so yeah, I wrote something down about this, like whether I'm often concerned with whether I'm doing the right thing in those situations. Like, what should I be doing to really help this person? So it's all of like should statement type stuff for that. And so yeah, it is sort of realizing, I guess, the spectrum of what people value in those situations and how I should be responding to it based on what that person needs. But if they're not directly telling me, that becomes difficult. So yeah, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before with the the emotional tapestry of the tribe in terms of like the meetings at work, like what people are feeling about something, whether they're feeling like this meeting isn't valuable, and whether they're getting something meaningful out of it, and trying to respond to that and help it be a more productive meeting. Because we do have these sort of regularly scheduled meetings, because we do Scrum, for those of you aware of that, where there are certain set meetings we have every day and every other week. And sometimes people feel like those meetings aren't necessarily providing the value that they should, or they're confused about what the value even should be. So I do often feel somewhat responsible to try and make sure that we're getting the intended value out of that. And sometimes that's difficult because I'm not sure what our company necessarily wants us to get out of those meetings, and that can be tricky. I don't know if I want to get into that too much, but like that there's sort of this aspect of what the company wants us to get out of it versus what Scrum as a system, as designed, wants us to get out of those sorts of things. So I generally want to try and get the ball rolling, at least, in some way stimulate the conversation. So in that way, I guess I am feeling responsible for creating that emotional atmosphere. I don't really think about it as emotional, but it is sort of a let's take advantage of this time. Let's not just moan about our problem. Let's try and like come to solutions. So it's I mean, I guess that is a vibe of sorts that I'm trying to more or less enable. So that's where I see that playing out in my work life anyway. And I would say in general, I like thinking back to dinner, lunch in college, right? Like trying to enable a fun atmosphere where people are having stimulated conversations. I think sometimes I really do struggle with creating those situations. And that's where I see like that split with the EJ-ness, the play and the blast, where like the getting started when creating the atmosphere feels very difficult. Like where do I like actually come at this to create it versus just like playing and maintaining it and keeping a positive vibe going is so much more natural to me. So hopefully that was enlightening. If you guys like what you see, I do some interviews here with objective personality, mostly with people that are untyped, but I'm actually doing a interview with some people that have been typed as well, so we'll try and get a broad spectrum of people. Not talking about functions so much, but just kind of getting to know people and getting examples of what those types look like in real life. So, all right, I'll see you guys later.
COVID days.
Always just seems like there's more information out there